Good evening, Poultry Keepers. Good to see everyone here tonight. Our crew is well, we're almost all here. Alyssa's been out chasing pigs today, so I don't know what her situation is at the moment. But joining us tonight is Jeff and Karen, and of course myself. And tonight we're going to be talking about the molt. And honestly, I haven't seen this much interest in a subject that we've done before. So this should be a fun show. I know there's a lot of questions that folks have been voicing. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and let him explain what the heck the molt is and what it can do and what it should do and all the ins and outs about it. So Jeff, it's all yours, buddy.
Thanks, Rip. So just to state the obvious, and I'm not being, the molt is a natural occurrence. Every bird is going to go through at least a molt a year. Some birds go through 2 or 3 or 4 molts a year. But for us, talking about chickens, the molt is an annual occurrence. If it happens more than once a year, something went wrong, we just need to figure it out and correct it. So, what do you need to, what we need to know about the molt, right, is the real questions is how effective is your molt, right? And if you do it right, the molt can be extremely effective, in transforming your birds and keep them healthy for a lot more generations. How long does it take? So for the average chicken, this doesn't include the heavy breeds. Rip and I were just talking about it before we came on, but you're looking at about 45 to 60 days for your 4, 5, 6 pound chickens. Now, your bigger stuff or your birds with a lot more plumage to them, longer tail feathers, things like that, you could be looking at 80, 85 days. It's going to take them longer to get them back to that full feather, get them back to looking the way you want them to look. So you need to set your calendar and be ready to, to plan your molt. And people ask, what do I do to help it, right? So we're going to go into in depth on this, but so really you want to, during the molt, the birds are running a fever. They're not feeling the best. They're really grumpy. You're grumpy because they look like crap. They're just not the prettiest birds anymore. So everybody needs to keep calm. You need to do whatever you can to keep your birds as calm as possible. Keep them as comfortable as possible. Realize that they're running a couple more body degrees temperature than normal. So we need to take steps to, increase the airflow, keep them comfortable, make sure that they're properly fed and watered. It's not difficult, but it just takes a little bit more understanding, on the manager side to take care of it. So, what is the molt for? And by the way, type in your questions whenever you have them. If I say something that triggers a question, we want to make sure that we get them answered. This is kind of a odd subject, and a lot of people have questions, so don't be bashful. So what's going on during the molt? And I don't know that everybody understands this, but so what should happen during the molt is a weight management plan. So the birds should be going through a diet, and we're doing body repair. Everybody just looks at it like their birds look yucky, the feathers are falling out. They don't kind of comprehend what's really going on the inside of that bird. But there's a real transformation going on inside the chicken, not just the feathers. So the managing factors that I think, where what we need to keep in mind, things that and Rip's going to make all these notes available for folks after the fact and post them as in the file section, so you don't have to scribble furiously. So what we want to be able to do is you actually want to weigh the birds. So the managing factors are weighing. A good effective molt is the birds are going to lose somewhere between 10 and 20% of their body weight. This depends on their internal fat. And I don't know, those of you who are watching, but Karen's going to pop up a picture of what internal fat looks like.
I am okay.
Yeah. Right. So when she did her necropsy, for us to show the inside, hopefully all of you can see that. But all the yellow is internal fat deposits. So we want to melt all of those internal fat deposits off during the molt, or as much as we can. So that can be 10 to 20%, depending on the amount of that internal fat. We also, during this time, we want to shrink the ovaries and the testicles and get them back down to pullet size or cockerel size. So they're going to be a lot more effective. We're going to end up with better fertility and better egg production. So your hatchability should improve if the molt went well and we did what we wanted to do. Your next round of fertility or for hatching eggs should be better. And so that's what we're shooting for anyway. I want to encourage you all to take pictures of your birds. Not every bird, your key birds, the birds that you have the highest level of interest in. I know you're interested in all of them, but everybody has their special ones. So take some good pictures, get some close-ups, different angles, different views, and we want to be able to do before and after pictures. So hopefully you can get pictures before the feathers start falling off. You can get them while they're still fairly well feathered. Get as close as you can. And you want to look at your feather quality. You may want to spread out some feathers, if you have a macro lens and you can do it, get really close up, get some of those very detailed feather, so you're looking at the composition of the feather. All right. So the hard part, and I think this is where everybody's has a lot more questions. I, haven't said anything that anybody doesn't particularly know already. How do you feed during the molt? Okay. So Karen picks on me all the time about this a little bit, but so a molt feed is going to be at 12%, roughly somewhere close to 12% protein. It's going to be a low energy, very high fiber, and we're going to feed a controlled amount. Right. So for birds, 2 to 4 pounds, you're going to feed 2 ounces of molt feed. For birds in that 4 to 6 pound range, you're going to feed 3 ounces of molt feed. And you need to weigh this. This isn't a guess. This isn't a free choice. So if you're saying, well, I just let my birds eat whatever they want, then you can turn off YouTube and go do something else, because this isn't for you, right? To do a good molt, you have to be weighing the feed. Once you know a unit of measure, whether it's a quarter cup, eighth of a cup, whatever, you can use that, but you need to at least weigh it at some point to know what you're starting with.
Well, I have a question.
Yep.
So would you weigh according to what your birds weigh now, or what you want them to weigh at the end of the molt? So my birds would be in the 8 to 10, but I would want them to end up in the 4 to 6. Okay, not quite that far, but
You can't get from there to there.
I want them to end up so they're at 8, and I want them to end up at 7. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, obviously you could do 3.5, right? This isn't magic.
Yeah, it's not. And
Okay.
right. So it's kind of where your target range is, where you want them to be. So yes, if you are looking for a 6 pound bird, you want to feed them for that, 4 to 6 pound range. Not where their starting weight is, but where their target weight is. That's a good question.
Yeah.
So where they should be according to the standard, or where you want them to be. And for 8 to 10 pound birds, you're going to feed 4 ounces. And that sounds like a lot, but look, this is a 50% reduction in calories. Okay. And it's almost a 50% reduction in protein. Right. And so the reason for the really high fiber is to bulk them up. Right. So they feel satiated, they feel full, but they're not full of starches and carbohydrates and fats and proteins, right? So they will, and this is not a cruel and inhumane, this isn't when we talk about forced molding back in the old days, like you would take away their light for, 48 hours and you take away their feed for 3 days. And if that didn't work, then you took away their water for a couple of days. So that's back, and that's almost getting to the point of being outlawed. But it's, that's the old term of forced molding.
Well,
But
theoretically, you haven't said anything yet that you couldn't just do when the birds choose to molt, right? I mean, so far, all the things you've listed, weigh them ahead of time, feed them a different feed,
right.
wait till they lose. I mean, theoretically, you could do that for every bird individually if you had the patience for that. Whenever that happens.
Yeah, you are right. You could do that on an individual bird basis, but if you got more than 10 birds, I don't think that's going to happen. So
Okay. So
otherwise, you'd have to have them completely segregated. So the birds would have to then be individualized or individual pens. This still allows for grouping. Like you could still run, as long as you had enough feeder space for everybody to eat at the same time, you could run a group of 100 birds, and it doesn't matter because you're going to feed a known quantity, and based on weight, you're going to feed what they need, but it works.
Do you have any logic or any knowledge as to why Purina wants to do feather fixer and raise the protein during the molt? Like, is there?
I hear that a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so they're already trying to get them out of the molt. They didn't even give the bird a chance to molt, right? And do everything it needs to do. Like it didn't get a chance to drop all of its feathers, didn't get a chance to lose any body weight, it didn't get a chance to shrink ovaries, it didn't get it, we neglected all of that.
Okay.
But okay, I don't want to get shot for this, and no hate mail, please. But here's the deal, right? As chicken lovers, we're trying to help our birds, and we want to fix them as quick as we can. Purina is taking advantage of that emotional feeling, and saying, "Oh, feed this and help them through the molt faster." Well, okay, so that's what happens. But if we don't lose that internal body weight, we're not, the birds are never going to be, they might look good faster, but they're not any healthier. So if people are doing breeding, we're not helping perpetuate our line further down the road. We're just going to keep internal fat for another year and add to it. And, it's just going to compound the problem.
Jeff, could I throw a comment in there on
Yes,
that?
sir.
Over the past couple of years, I don't know how many folks I've talked to, but they have been, and these are primarily large fowl breeders, but they almost to a person say, my birds laid pretty good as pullets, but then when they got into that second year's hens, production went to pot. And I said, probably because your birds are too fat. And I would explain what to do, and some did, some didn't, but the ones that did invariably came back to me and said, I tried what you were talking about and you were right. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So, a pullet should lay, it's still going to lay the best, right? But the second cycle should be 85 or 90% of what she laid as a pullet. So the great breeders that are out there, they kept track of how many eggs their pullets laid, right? And that next lay cycle should be, like I said, 85, 90% of what the first lay cycle was. The third lay cycle should be 85 or 90% of what the second lay cycle was, right? So they lose approximately 10 or 15% each year in those lay cycles. Now, somewhere out around year 4 or 5, they kind of level off, and so the fourth lay cycle, fifth lay cycle, they're all going to be, unless we screw something up, they're all going to be pretty much the same. she kind of holds off there 4, 5, and 6, and then 7 she starts declining in 8, 9. You know, she's really tapering off. You know, you're lucky if you're getting eggs out of her at that point. But you know, there are some very productive hens still out at year 7 and 8, and you know, enough to create progeny. You know, a high quality egg that you can hatch, so that you don't lose that family line. That is very possible, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there shaking their head like, you know, Jeff's lost his mind. He's crazy. This ain't going to happen. But it's, yeah, I'm getting lots of reports of 7, 8-year-old hens still hatching eggs, still doing fine. But putting them through this molt, you know, is part of that procedure. And, you know, so back to the managing factors on the molt is, you know, you need to be in a situation where you can reduce and control lighting on those birds. We need to get the lights down to 10 or 11 hours. So you're going to have some indoor housing for them where you can control sunrise. I'm not worried about sunset. I'm worried about when they first see light in the morning. So having that sort of environment or that sort of housing that you can control that light exposure. So the biggest one, and I left it for last, is going to be the environment that the birds are in. So molt inevitably happens, you know, for most people during the hottest time of the year. Airflow, having good airflow is going to be critical. So you may want to invest in fans or something else to help them. Want to make sure that you got plenty of shade. Try and figure out a way to make sure that they're getting, you know, good cool water throughout the day, as cool as possible. You can even think about, you know, putting ice in a water reservoir that then gravity flows, just so that you know that they're getting cooler water. Remember, they got a fever going on inside of them, so they, you know, everything we can do to help them be more comfortable is going to be good. And the other thing to think about is plenty of space. They may need more space than you typically allow them, and you know, throughout the rest of the year. So they're going to be really grouchy, and like I said, they're going through a transformation. I want to avoid cannibalism, so giving them a little bit of extra space. You got to watch their personality and see, you know, if they're getting really irritable. We just don't need them to start fighting and carrying on and tearing each other up. That doesn't lead to a good looking bird on the other side.
Jeff, along those lines, I think some of that is somewhat breed dependent. Your larger birds, Cochins, Orpingtons, Brahmas, seem to be very mild mannered, and they don't kind of get this flight or flight thing going on during the molt. Most of your dual purpose breeds they tend to be on the heavier side. So again, they have a little bit calmer temperament, but where I see it just go absolutely berserk is in some of the game breeds, some of the Mediterranean breeds, those little high energy things. They get ill and fractious at the drop of a hat when they're molting.
Yeah, pretty much any stress, you know, those gamier birds, anything that triggers them with stress is going to cause them to, you know, want to rip into something. So we just need to be careful and conscious of that. And
all right, can we talk light for a little bit here?
Yeah.
All right, so right there, telling me that I have to control the lighting and reduce it makes me, you know, not want to do it, because I don't want to build. I'm not going to build inside facilities. Just that's not in the cards. But you also said that most birds molt in the hottest part of the year, which is not when the light is. So I mean, they naturally molt when the light is longer than that. I mean, that's October here, or late October in North Carolina, when you get down to 11 hours. So can you try it without controlling the light?
Okay. Yeah, no. Look, they want to molt this time of year. That's fine. We're just, you know, if you can get the lights down during this time, so, or if you can reduce the light intensity, okay? So just something that
You put little
provides them
blinders on all of them. Peepers. Put little
just something to shade them so it keeps them. So light intensity is one of their activity stimulants. So, you know, a little bit of shade, they're going to be a little bit more mellow, you know, less grumpy. So if they can hang out in the shade, no, you don't have to get the lights down there. But if you do get the lights down, you know, for people who want to hatch in the fall, you know, we've talked about this in, you know, before, but if you wanted to hatch in the fall, then you can start stimulating with light and gradually bringing them back up, right? So, and they'll come back into egg lay, you know, in the fall of the year. But reducing light is going to reduce their activity level, or, you know, and their aggressiveness. It's just going to keep them calmer. So the lighting is more of the calmness thing, you know, and you got heavier breeds, so they're not necessarily high strung anyway. But for people that might have a high strung bird, you know, breed, keeping them more shaded, more, you know, muted light is going to help out. But if you want to do fall breeding, getting those lights down to that 10 or 11 hours so that you can then, you know, stimulate them back up is going to be beneficial. Rip, when did you hatch? Weren't you a fall hatcher?
Yes. And I did that because I was dealing with the hot temperatures, and I was getting big combs and beefy combs and huge wattles. And I found out that by hatching in the fall and in the winter, I could control that to some degree, and shrink those combs and wattles back down to where they look more like they should.
Okay.
All right, I know you knew I was gonna do this to you. So
That's fine.
let's talk again about the stages. So it sounds to me like there almost is 3 stages. There's like a starting the molt, there's a in the molt, and then there's a coming out of molt.
Yes, that is true. There's basically 3 stages of the molt. So you got to trigger the molt and get that, you know, where you're dropping that feed down. Hopefully you don't have to take water away, but you know, you're changing over to that other feed. Now, to do a humane molt, you know, where you're not doing feed withdrawal and all that other stuff, look, it's going to take about 5 to 7 days to start seeing those feathers falling off. Right.
That seems really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're not going to be bald in 5 to 7 days.
No, I know, but
you're going to start seeing a lot more, you know, feathers in the litter, you know, or on the ground. It's going to take 5 or 6, 7 days before you start seeing that. It's, you know, they're not going to be bald for a couple weeks. So, you know, and I saw somebody had asked, you know, how long do you feed the 12%? Well, you feed the 12% until you actually achieve the body weight that you're looking for. So that's going to be the pullet weight based on the breed standard. You know, we're trying to get somewhere close to the pullet weight.
Right? Or whatever your birds were at.
Or the cockerel. Yeah. Right.
If you got history, you can just get back to that. Yeah.
You know, and you may or may not go that far. Just depends on how tight of a body, what you want the bird to look like, you know, what is your goal? So for somebody who's more in it on the serious breeding side and not necessarily on the show side, you know, getting them really close to that pullet weight and is going to be really important. You know, because that is going to affect that next lay cycle and the number of eggs you're going to get and the fertility of those eggs in that next lay cycle. So that's purely on the owner. You know, show folks may only lose 10%, but, you know, I think they're still breeding, right? They still want offspring and they still want progeny. So, you know, trying to get close to that pullet weight is going to be important. And I think, Rip, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you get closer to that pullet weight, when you bring them back out, I think your feather quality is by far better when you drop that body weight.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a lot better feather structure.
they seem to be a little bit more active because they're not carrying around all that excess body fat.
Yep.
All right, Ingrid's got some questions for us. So,
Okay.
how bald is bald, and are they going to lose all their feathers or just more in some areas? Bald is rip, is what he's trying
That's
to
right.
say.
No,
When they
it's all
molt,
relative.
when they molt naturally, lots of birds just sort of push out the feathers and the new feathers, and you don't get a naked bird.
Yeah, you don't get it. I mean, from what I've seen, you don't get a truly naked bird, right? You don't, like the primary wing feathers don't always come out. You know, they may push out later. And, you know, I want to hear Rip's experience on this, but primarily I'm looking at like head, neck, back, you know, the down feather, under the wing, all the, you know, what I refer to as a secondary feather or a not, you know, not a primal feather for sure. But, you know, even tails should cycle out. So they're going to be pretty close to, I mean, it's not going to look like a scalded plucked chicken, but it should look pretty close. I mean, Rip, how bald do you see him get when?
Down here again, you factor in the geography. I've seen them get pretty bald down here because we're still pretty high temperatures when the molt starts down here. Usually, unless they're doing some weird things with the molt. And you're talking about the wing feathers and the main tail feathers being delayed in coming out. I have on occasion had instances where I knew I wanted to take a particular bird to a particular show, and if they were getting close to that time that I knew it was going to take X number of weeks to grow those main tail feathers back, I'd pull them out.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. You help them out. You just get a good pair of pliers and, you know, you pull them out, help them along.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you do want them to recycle. And, you know, on a good molt feed, you know, like I was describing, and Karen's got a graphic if you want to look at it. But I mean, on a true molt feed, there, you know, hopefully you all can see this, but, you know, we'll make it public information as well on the groups so you can have it. You know, it's an example ration in 100-pound mix. So it's small enough that anybody can work with it. But yeah, if we're doing this right, you know, we pretty much should recycle, you know, all those feathers. And here's what I'm finding this year in the molt, paying a little bit more attention to it, is the birds that are carrying more internal body fat are the slowest ones to drop the feathers because they are living off of stored energy. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they're reabsorbing that internal fat to compensate for what the feed doesn't have. So, I mean, pretty much that level of baldness is going to be your, that and weighing them, but that level of baldness is going to be a really key factor for knowing when, you know, they've kind of achieved their molt, you know, their target weights. I think you're going to find those two come together pretty well as far as target weight and loss of feathers.
All right, I got some questions for Rip. So, Rip, would you say that all breeds lose feathers similarly? Yeah.
Similarly, yes. At the same speed, no. I know the old timers liked a bird that once they started molting, they dropped those feathers as quickly as they could, and they were growing feathers and they were in and out of the molt as quickly as possible, so they were back into production. And that's something you can select for when you're breeding birds. I don't know too many people that do that anymore, but those that were raising birds and not only showing them but selling them for commercial use, they wanted a fast molting bird. They didn't.
It's on the selection tool. Yeah.
That's right. They didn't want any lollygaggers on this molting business.
I feel like maybe a forced molt would cause that. You're trying to make everybody molt quickly, so I mean, you might not have you might not have that as a selection point as much as if you did it naturally. If you're sort of bringing it into being, but since people don't usually use that anyway, that's that.
My years of working with, like Karen and, SPN and Heritage Breeders and everybody else, the conversation about controlling the molt never occurred, right? This was never a subject. Everybody just let the birds do what they wanted to do whenever they wanted to do it. And I was pulling my hair out. I'm like, why? Let's take
Because that feels natural.
I know it feels natural.
That goes along with the no lights and no. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying
no,
those are bad things, but I'm just
right.
Just feels
even
right.
Okay. So even if you wanted to let the molt occur naturally, we should be at least adjusting the feed to help the bird through the molt, right? But nobody ever adjusted their feed. Nobody adjusted their light. Nobody adjusted their housing. Sorry, I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out that, breeders kind of ignored the molt or managing the molt.
Yeah, all I did was mark on my spreadsheet when it started and when it ended. So I knew who did it fastest. Yeah.
And then the other thing I'm hearing is the molt takes, 3 or 4 months, right? It seems like it just drags on and on and on and on. And, this is one way to get in it, get out of it, get it over with, hopefully within a 60-day window. The heavy breeds probably 70, 75, maybe a little bit longer. But when you see that first feather, when you see the molt starting with one bird, you might as well know that the whole flock is going to do it. You might as well just, I don't know, I'm thinking just get it over with, but I might be thinking wrong. Tell me I'm wrong, Rip.
No, you're not wrong. And, from a husbandry and management standpoint, if you're dealing with a bunch of irregular molting birds, it's a pain trying to get those birds through the molt. But if they're all pretty much close together in the timing of the molt, when they initiate it, it becomes much easier to manage, much easier.
So when you were molting, did you change the feed? Did you do anything special?
No, I didn't know to do that back then.
All right. Did you even cut back? I mean, so the birds cut back on their own, actually. When they're in the middle of the molt, you'll see about a 25% reduction in feed consumption, 25, 30%. So, and that's because their temperature's up. So, I mean, if you look at that molt ration, I've done a lot to reduce the corn and the heavy starches because those cause, body temperature to increase. So, corn's way down the list, right? There's oats, alfalfa, those are fiber. They're not as starchy. Barley's got a heavy fiber. It's not as starchy as corn. So the corn and the wheat are down below. And you don't have to use those ingredients, So somebody listening says, hey, I want to try the molt, but I can't get all those things. That's fine. Contact me somewhere. We'll work it out based on what you have locally available.
Tell me about the sunflower seeds. Is that like I go to Walmart and I buy a bag of sunflower seeds?
It is. You know what? And the only reason I left sunflower seeds in there is so everybody listening doesn't hate me, okay? Because everybody likes to feed sunflower seeds. They are not doing a single thing for those birds, okay? That was my compromise. That was my olive branch, so I don't get strung up.
So my feed will only weigh 98 pounds because I don't need to add no sunflower seeds.
No, don't need the sunflower seeds at all. Don't really need the corn, but you know what? I just, if I told people you didn't need corn in a chicken feed, I'd be tarred and feathered. So it'd just be, it's not gonna, that wouldn't go well. So
I want to get Sue's comment in here because it's really funny. So she's got a hen. The only way to tell she's in molt is that her tail disappears. And then she said others that look like they've been playing with a weed eater. So I thought that was funny.
It was funny. That was good.
All right. So to go over the feeding part again.
Okay.
So you're decreasing protein and then protein and fats so that they lose the stored fat. Is that?
Right. So we're reducing energy. We're reducing protein because if we don't reduce everything together, they'll metabolize protein into energy. So we're reducing protein. We're reducing carbohydrates. in calories, and we're also reducing fat because we want the bird to burn off stored fat. But again, you need to know what your pullet, weights are, right? Not every bird. So like people, birds further south where it stays warm more of the year will not be carrying as much internal fat as birds in.
Imagine what mine looked like up north.
Yes, yeah, it'd be twice that much. But
go ahead, sorry.
I have a little comeback for that, but I won't say anything.
Go ahead, Rip. Come on.
No, I can. You just look like they have serious bustles on up north.
Yeah, no. When they see the days start declining and the nights start getting colder, they know how to put on some stored fat up here. Let me tell you. So, yeah.
Jeff, I did have a question that came in on Messenger because they were having a problem posting to our comment section here.
Yeah.
But they want to know, what is a natural catalyst that initiates the molt? If we don't do anything, what triggers it?
Oh man, okay, so at the end of a lay cycle or at the end of a season, and for most hens, it's the end of a lay cycle. Any significant stress, right? Like being without water. I've seen a large weather front roll through. Could be like drastic, 3 days of rain. Anything out of the ordinary is enough of an excuse for a hen to start molting, right? No rhyme or reason to it. And this year, everybody's ahead of schedule. Normally, I start thinking about seeing birds molting around July 4th, somewhere around that time frame. Now, I was getting reports of molting in June, right? California, Texas, Hawaii, throughout actually. We started to see feathers drop this year. So part of me, and I'm seeing other things as far as like crop harvest, because of what we do here. We work, with total agriculture. I'm seeing like all the crops are maturing 3 to 4 weeks ahead of it. Everything's maturing early this year, right? So I have no idea, as an almanac kind of person who believes in the Farmer's Almanac, I'd have to think that there's something going on with moon phases this year. Just the general growing year, we're ahead of schedule. So the molt was ahead of schedule almost by a month this year, and I'm not sure why. But there's something out there, out there in the universe that's triggering this, and it's out of our control. We just, for the most part, if you're going to let things do it naturally, this year was early because normally it's July is what I'm hearing reports of the molt coming in, sometime that early mid-July.
All right, let's get back into the feeding part. So somebody came in late. Are the nutritional info, I think they're talking about when we put up the thing, is that the Fertrell show conditioner in the recipes there?
Yeah, no, that's the molt feed. That's
Okay.
actually that's the molt recipe.
Right. But you don't have the show conditioner in this recipe, right?
No, but actually you could replace some of the fish meal and the 3 amino acids with the breeder supplement, with the show and breeder supplement.
Okay. So it could be of use.
It could be of use in there.
Need
yes.
a slightly different recipe.
Right.
Okay. And these recipes, like, this is what you can take to your feed mill, right? If you're getting a custom ration done. I mean, it's not only for people who...
You could, but they're going to look at you funny. So, yeah.
Everybody who's going to a custom person probably already gets looked at funny.
Yeah, but all of us crazy chicken people get looked at kind of weird on occasion. So it's not,
All right.
The feed mill guy says, oh, man, here comes that crazy chicken person again. So
My feed mill guy is still... It's been 2 years of making my own feed, and he swore I wouldn't last more than 4 months. So every time I go to buy ingredients, he's very nice, but he still says, "You sure you don't want us to make that for you?" So
I just wish that when I was doing a custom mix, my feed guy would say, a crazy chicken person, but that's not the adjectives he used to describe me.
No. I was being nice when I said that, Rip. So.
All right. So, are we thinking that the molt will be shorter for birds that are that are fed a controlled amount of feed each day versus free feeding?
Absolutely, there ain't no doubt about it. That's if you control feed them with this low energy, low protein feed, we're going to drop the weight quicker, and once they've achieved the weight, then we're going to bring them back over to like a 18% grower feed or a 20% feed, depending on the bird. It depends on how their feathers are and so on. But once you've achieved your target weight and feathers are dropped, and you get where you want to be,
How often would you weigh them during this process? How fast do they lose weight?
I figure that they're going to lose it within, depends on how much they have to lose, 2 to 3 weeks. So I would weigh them at least once a week, because you don't want to go too far below. You can do damage if you get them too skinny, right? Because we don't want to lose muscle tone. We don't want to lose, we just want to get rid of the internal fat, shrink the ovaries, tighten them up a little bit and bring them back around.
All right. And this is so along the weight thing. If you're breeding to the standard, could you use the suggested ideal pullet weight that's in the standard for your breed? What do you think, Rip?
Yes, that's what I recommend. Now, some people may be able to get close to it, but they may not be able to attain that. For example, with your birds, I think you would have a hard time getting down to that pullet weight. But I think you can get enough weight off of them to make a significant difference long term for the birds.
And I'm thinking maybe I can do that with my first year birds. Probably not my 5-year-old birds aren't going to go back to their pullet weight after years of not doing that. But
It'd be
just like us humans, yeah.
All right, so look, when you, for those of you who are going to try this, and I'm guessing it's going to be less than 20%, but look, when you make the change to that molt feed, right? It's not pelleted, it's not pretty. Your birds, the first few days, you might as well not have even put feed in the cup, right? So they're really not, they're going to look at you really strangely. And so don't cave in and go back to doing what you were doing. If you're gonna do this, be committed to it, because the first 3 or 4 days, your birds are gonna look at you like you've lost your mind. They're gonna stare up at you like, what, you want me to eat this? Okay. So, I'm sure Rip's like this, but I don't know about the rest of you, but as a kid growing up, I didn't get to leave the dinner table until I cleaned my plate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you need to be with your chickens. Don't go soft. Don't go mushy. Let that nurturing feeling just kind of go, just get rid of it. Just push it off, And
Tough love. You're doing it for their own good.
Right.
And don't scrape it off on the floor hoping the dog will get it before you get caught either.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an art to feeding the dog under the table. It's hard to get away with.
I lost it. Look,
What?
I lost it, so I'm going to remember while we read Melissa's. Would there be a similar plan for molting waterfowl?
Rip, I'm going to need your help on this, but my understanding is waterfowl actually recycle their feathers. After 8 weeks, they recycle their feathers every 5 weeks anyway. So they're kind of perpetually regenerating.
Yeah.
I don't know that they go through a hard molt like a chicken does.
And then you throw in the factor that in a lot of the waterfowl, the ducks will go through and molt off their breeding plumage and go into that eclipse plumage, which throws another kink into that works as well too.
I need to know something before we go on to the rest of the comments. Are we going to try to finish this up tonight, or are we going to talk about coming out of mold next week?
I'm open either way. I mean, we're getting some good questions here, and we're getting some good discussion going. I'm fine with doing coming out of the mold.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it, and coming out of the mold's not that hard. I mean, it does mean going back on a very high quality, good amino acid. Those amino acids are critical coming out of the mold, right? So if you're not running those high levels of amino acids, like I've talked about previously, you're not going to get the feather formation. So if you're not feeding, top shelf feed, then, but coming out of the molt, you want to be at least an 18%. If it's hot, like if you're in Florida where a rip is, probably want to bring them out on a 20%, like a starter feed with higher amino acids, just to get the right feather formations and the right feather follicles coming out of that molt.
And again, you're starting this because they've lost the weight you were expecting. So it's not like you feed them differently once their feathers are all grown back in.
No, I mean, once they're fully feathered again, they're where you want them to be, then they're going to go on your maintenance feed, whatever you were feeding as a breeder maintenance feed previously, okay, or a show maintenance feed previously. But coming out of the molt, you don't want to, it's not about the protein, but it's hard for most people to get a feed that has the right amino acids coming out of the molt to make the feathers what you want them to be. Okay.
Yes.
So feathers are protein, but they're actually more about the amino acids than they are about the protein. So, but coming out of the molt, you want a really good, high quality 18 to 20% feed. Again, don't get carried away. Hopefully people learn how to control feed their birds, on a regular basis instead of just free choice feeding. One of my biggest pet peeves, but anyway, that's not for tonight. So that'll help you maintain that body weight, but you got to have a really good, high quality feed. I've posted files with, some good, high quality 18% feeds out there on a couple of the different groups and pages. So they are available. People can reach out to me. I can give them, an outline of what I'm looking for. But yeah, coming out of the molt's not that hard. Just don't get carried away, and don't make the change until you've achieved the body weight that you want to achieve. Right. So it's more about body weight. It's not just about the feathers.
I remember the question I forgot earlier. So people don't have access to all these different feeds that we're talking about. So they do have access to layer feed and scratch grains. What happens if you try to get down to 12% by combining those two?
So, look, I mean, you're not going to get there and the energy level is going to be way too high. You really need the high fiber. You really need the low energy, right? The majority of those ingredients can be purchased as individual ingredients. Yes, you're going to have to mail order them in, right? They're not going to be, most people have access to oats. Most people have access to rabbit pellets or alfalfa pellets. I know it says meal, but I don't care if you use pellets. A lot of people can find cracked corn. A lot of people can find, whole barley. Wheat's getting a little iffy to find, but, most of those ingredients aren't, unrealistic to find in most neighborhoods. Okay. So, yeah,
in a way, you can think of it as treating your birds, because I know you said they won't be eating it, but if they normally get pellets or crumbles, I feel like giving them those sort of whole nice grains, they might think they're getting treats for a while.
They might. Yep.
But all right, don't do that. Let's see. All right, I did one about at what age, and so at what age should they molt? And then my sub question on this is, can you really do it anytime you want? Can you decide, like, my birds, I can't tell what their coloration is going to be until they go through their first molt. So can you molt them at 8 months just so you don't have to wait a year and a half?
You can. It's really hard under a year. Most molt, I mean, okay, so yes, they're going to molt, but you're not going to see it as they're developing to maturity for that first year. They're going to be losing feathers, gaining feathers. So they are kind of doing like a transient molt, but they're not molting as we know it. So it's pretty hard to molt a bird before it's a year old. To do a forced molt, you know, a controlled molt, it's kind of hard to do that before they're a year old.
But if you wanted to do it at 16 months instead of 18, or you wanted to do it at 20 months, like after that 18-month period.
Pretty much after they're a year old,
Okay.
we can induce a molt. So, yeah.
All right.
Just let me throw a question out there. If I know I'm going to a show in November, I want to go to the Ohio National, early November. When do I need to start working towards initiating a molt, getting them through them so they'll have time to get through it and regrow those feathers in time for that show?
For a light breed, Rip, I would want at least 90 days just to be sure. Okay. I don't want to be gambling on it, you know, because that show is important to you. So for a medium and lighter breed, I would say it should only take 60 days, but something inevitably is going to go wrong. So give yourself somewhere close to 90 days to initiate that molt. So now you're looking at, October, September, no later than the 1st of August, right? Which that should be easy enough. You know, but if people got shows here like county fairs, local shows, things like that, you know, I'm seeing shows here and there in July and August, you know, they're going to be wanting to molt sometime back in May, which seems way early to me.
Yeah.
But, and why you would have a poultry show in July and August when the birds are molting anyway, that's really tough. So, I mean, there's not a huge amount of them, but I do see some. You know, there's some pictures popping up with some different shows here and there.
Yes.
But you know, you want them to get through the breeding season and hatching season and all that. So, but for the people who want to hit the show circuit hard, you know, in the fall, I would want to start that molt, you know, push it, you know, the last week of May, first week of June, so that you know you're through it by the 1st of September. And you can start working your bird, cleaning them, prepping them for the show, you know, doing all that and making your selections. I'm thinking, yeah, last week of May, first week of June is a really good time for the people who do show. Right now, for people that are purely breeding, and I've been working with Karen to try and prolong her egg laying season. I would much rather see that molt somewhere mid to late August through September and coming back out of it in October. Okay.
They're still holding on. I don't have any molting
Okay.
yet.
Yeah. Well, and that's really what we want to do. So for a breeder who's just, you know, trying to perpetuate the breed and improve it, and I would push for a later molt that's occurring in August, September, and October, you know, and then get them cleaned up, you know, to come back through winter, get them ready for another breeding season.
We have a slew of good questions, so let's shoot through those.
That's fine. Yep.
All right. So Ingrid wants to know if birds are fed a set amount of feed every day, how do they accumulate internal fat at all to begin with?
That's a great question, but not everybody. I think if you polled the listeners listening tonight, you would find that a lot of people like to fill a feeder and go. And I would say more than 50 or 60% of poultry keepers are doing, you know, free choice or ad libitum feed, and probably only 30 to 40% are doing a controlled feed amount.
Well,
So
and
that's part of it. The other part of it is commercially available feeds and the ingredients that go in there make it very easy for a bird to store fat. So it's just.
Well,
they're
and
not
you recommend
necessarily
free feeding throughout their growing time, right? For that
I
first
do.
year?
I do, for that first year until they mature, until you deem them mature. Okay. So some at 6 or 8 months, some is a year old. Um,
So my
you know,
birds take advantage of that time frame to pack
yeah,
on the pounds. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, most Rhode Island Reds or Australorps, or about 8 months, you can turn that off, right? You can start controlled. Again, weighing them once they hit that, standards bullet weight, then it's time to start limit feeding. Feed them based on what they weigh and what their productivity level is.
And to be honest, I start controlling it when they start laying. So I feel like that's the point at which they should sort of stop growing in terms of their whole body. So I do those two together.
It's usually around 6 months, isn't it?
Yeah, depends on what time of year it is. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. So right now in Missouri, the temperatures have been excessively high and very abnormal for the area. The birds are very heat stressed during the day. Should we wait until temps ease to limit the stress of molt and heat at the same time?
Nope, they're already stressed. You might as well just get it over with. Just just get right to it. If you're ready to do it and you can put all the pieces of the puzzle together to make this happen, you know, um, I don't see any reason in waiting, until I mean, everybody's hot right now. And yes, Missouri is hotter than it is, well above average. Um, but yeah, I'm surprised they haven't started to mold on their own already. But if you can get everything together that you need to mold them, I would go ahead and just start it and get it over with.
All right. I got a good one for you. So Bruce is a fermented feed person. How does he feed a percentage?
Well, you weigh it out as dry before you add the water and start to ferment, and then you're gonna feed that amount, figure out what that swells into, and then you can weigh it again. But you weigh it ahead of time based on a number of birds. So if it's 3 ounces and it's 100 birds, it's 300 ounces. So you're looking at just shy of 20 pounds, 19 pounds, and start the ferment and then spread it out so everybody gets an equal amount.
Because fermenting it doesn't really change the percentages of the ingredients in there.
It depends on how long if it's up to a 72-hour soak, it's not going to change the calories and carbohydrates. It makes them a little bit more available, but they are still there. And when you start going over 72 hours, where you pop the germ and you start to get some sprouting going on, the protein and energy start to drop. So we are losing something. However, we've picked something up that nobody's yet identified, because the birds still perform very well on it past that. But I would just pre-weigh it ahead of time, based on the number of birds, and go ahead and start the soak or the fermentation.
All right. So Lloyd, probably the same response as Missouri, but Arizona still over hundreds, 110 this week. Is it okay to do it even in Arizona?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's fine. You just, you make steps like, and I'm going to get shot, but, you're doing a little bit of molasses and a little bit of vinegar in the water, maybe a pinch of salt, make some homemade chicken Gatorade, supply that to them, takes a little bit of stress off, but they're already stressed, so whether you start to molt now or you wait, it doesn't necessarily matter, but you might as well get it over with. I mean, we need to figure out a way to take a chicken's body temperature and find out if they're already pre-molt anyway. Normal temperature for most chickens, from everything I've seen, is 104, right? Is that what you ripped?
Yes.
Yeah. So, if people are starting to see 105, 106, then the birds have already started the process of molting. You just may be delaying it by not changing the feed or changing the environment. So We don't have the old-fashioned thermometers like when we were kids that you stick under your tongue or stick up your butt. And if you had some of those old glass type thermometers, stick one up a chicken's butt. Don't let go of it, by the way, otherwise it'll disappear. But yeah.
Then you can do a necropsy to find out how much internal fat your bird has once it sucked the thermometer up.
Right. Yeah. Do they even sell those old glass?
Yes.
I know they don't use mercury anymore. They use some red liquid dye that acts like mercury because mercury is toxic. But
I think it's alcohol they use in them now.
Okay. But yeah, so you can still get those? I
Yes.
haven't seen any in a long time.
You probably have to order them online or something to get them because I don't see them in the stores anymore.
Yeah, everybody's gone digital now. So.
All right. So Georgetta was not here for the beginning of the show, so keep that in mind. But would you recommend putting them in separate pens throughout the molt or keep them together? Would the if you could control the temperature and light, could you help speed up the process of molting? So first, you want to speed up the process of molting, and
you always, yes, you do want to speed up the process of molting. Look, they feel like crap, right? So think of it like they feel like they've got the flu, right? They don't feel good. They're running a temperature. They're lethargic. They're not happy. They're just trying to get through their day. So if you can speed up that process, they're going to be happier. You're going to be happier. You don't have to put them in separate pens, but they will need more space. Okay. And you're definitely going to want more airflow, right? So controlled temps, maybe not, but think about, putting good fans in place to keep the breeze move, keep the air moving all the time. If I was down where Lloyd was, I'd probably figure out a way to put a mister in front of the fan, get one of those misting fans, to help keep it a little bit cooler. Pretty much anything over 100 degrees, I would look into. They sell misting fans out there. You can find them at Granger, and I think Northern Tool has them. They're available.
Make sure you're talking low humidity, though. Don't add humidity in Florida and North Carolina.
They even work there. I don't know why, but they work. So,
separate pens would help though if they're picking on each other or if they're now fighting because they all feel like crap. No.
I never had an instance where I felt like I needed to go that route. To be honest with you.
Okay. All right. So if you choose to only feed commercial feed, what do you think about the Nutrina Feather Fixer for coming out of the molt?
My parents raised me, if you can't say something nice, just don't say anything at all. So I'm going to let that one slide.
All right. All right. Carol says she's got a friend who's not interested in weighing the birds. Is there any chance that friend can just feed them the molt formula for 45 days and assume that they're losing weight?
Yeah, just feed them the molt formula for, 21 days, and they're going to lose weight. If they feed a controlled amount for 21 days, they're going to lose some weight, and they're going to lose their feathers, and then they can bring them back around and, put them on an 18 or a 18% conditioner or developer and a 20%. Again, depending on where you live and what the temperature is, like Lloyd down there in Arizona, I would probably choose for a good quality 20%, with better amino acids, simply because the bird's appetite is not going to be that great, right? Even coming out of the molt based on temperature, the bird's appetite's not going to be that high. So I need to get those amino acids and those proteins delivered for good feathers, so that they come back in good. We get some really good feather growth.
All right, so that's pretty much it. I've got one question. Lloyd wants to know why his birds are lazy, but why don't his hens eat insects when he turns over his compost pile? Probably because it's 110 degrees there, Lloyd.
Yeah. I think Lloyd's pampering his birds just a little too much, in my opinion. Why would you want to go chase something when your owner's going to bring it to you anyway? So.
Exactly right. Plus, there's probably scorpions he's talking about out there, or tarantulas.
Okay. All right, here's a good one. So Jennifer uses the Fertrell poultry show breeder supplement. Does she need to stop that during the lower protein feed time?
She doesn't need to stop it, but she should get a hold of us so we can recalculate it based on using it. So, like I said, we can pull a little bit of the fish meal out of that formula that you posted to compensate for what's in the show and breeder. We can just readjust it so it fits. No, it's great to have it in there because of the amino acids and the type of protein that's in it. But again, we're not using the show for shelling as in a form for shelling, so that's why we didn't really talk about it. But we can make that work. So.
Anyone else? You guys good? I don't think we have a topic for the next show since we were.
Well, I think we really do because we haven't gotten into really that recovery from the mold.
Okay.
And I know that's of interest to a lot of the folks. So why don't we just sort of pick up where we left off in 2 weeks, and we'll finish up this topic on the mold. We've had some good discussions, some good questions, and thanks everybody for supporting us with that. But we will finish up the mold. We'll finish our mold in 2 weeks.
And anybody who watches this in between on YouTube, but if you add comments there, we can get those questions in, even if you can't come in live next week. We can answer questions that they can post on the in between. So, all right.
Again, thank you. I hope everyone has a good evening, and try to stay cool as much as possible and enjoy your birds. And until next time, this is it for Poultry Keepers 360 Live. Thanks everybody. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation by Poultry Keepers 360. All rights are reserved. This production has been made possible in part through the generous support of the Fur Trail Company, manufacturers of gardening and livestock products that are better naturally.